Good morning, I'm Norma Cowie, and once more I'm here for Norma Talks. Today I'm going to talk about the love I have for the tarot, a little bit of my history with it, a little bit of what I've learned, and a little bit of how it helps people and how it develops your psychic muscle. So it's going to be a little bit of potpourri of all the things that I have come to love about it. I began to learn this method of reading of tarot when I was 20 years old. I had one child, and very soon I was expecting a second one. And it was an interesting way I came to the adventure of the tarot, because my teacher then was William Balderstone, a British medium who had devised a different method of reading this ancient tool. And I was taught with the Arthur Edward Waite deck, and I still use the same mythology today. So the way I was taught it is very different from the way I teach it today. But let's face it, I am now in my 70s, so I've had over 50 years of figuring out which is the easiest and best way to impart the knowledge to others. So what is it I really love about it? I love how, being a person that had shut down psychically very, very young, that it opened up that psychic part of me. I love the message that it says. When I began to learn how to read these, we were taught to look at it as a direction of, you might say, philosophy. And I always say I'm a psychological reader. Now that I'm a reverend, I can actually use that term. I could not for many, many years. I was always a consultant. I had to be a consultant. I couldn't be a counselor, even though I'd have coaching expert and other lessons, and I had other things, but no, I couldn't do that. But once more, I gained the reverend, which I very rarely kind of put out in front of my name, but I am, and I do weddings and things like that. But at the same point, it's like I'm able to understand the psychology of us. Now, this deck of 78 symbols was created, would have been in the late 1800s by two people that were in the Order of the Golden Dawn, a mystery school. And that's how everybody learned things in those days. You belonged to a mystery school because it was secret. And they took this ancient tarot and they made what they call the lower arcana, because it's divided into two parts. The higher arcana, which is 22 symbols. And I'm going to show you the first symbol here, which is our magician, saying all things are possible. And that's where you learn in life that everything is possible. Here, he has all the lower arcana and all the tools that you need to require. The significance of this is basically, as above, up here, the aspiring to the red roses of desire, you can implement them into your material world so you aspire above to bring down, and this unity here, this connection to source, to be able to bring it down and work. And it shows a journey that you go right through to the end, where we have the world totally balanced. And there's lots of symbology that we've seen throughout the other symbols. Remember, there's 22 of them. And we also have the Fool, the one who works with faith. Faith completes all action. And so throughout this journey of the higher arcana, you learn how the spiritual world works for you. Oh yes, it can relate to the material day-to-day world as well, but how does our inner philosophy? Now, I found a number of years ago, probably a good 10, maybe, no, I think it was around 10 to 12 years ago, when people would come for readings and I would talk about their spiritual journey, they kind of would look at me with a glaze in their eye. And so I had to change my language, which I've had to do several times throughout the generations. But this, I had to change my language to philosophy. They really didn't have a spiritual base. They didn't understand the journey of coming into oneness within oneself. They didn't understand the energy around us that is there for us to utilize. So I began more and more to use the word philosophy. the need to know your philosophy. What is your philosophy? What are your beliefs? Because our inner beliefs end up being what is created in our world, or aid us to help deal with things in the outside world. So that whole journey. Now, one thing that became very important to me was this card, which is the third of the higher arcana, which is the love symbol. It's called the Empress, but it's about love and how the universe is governed by our universe, which is Earth, is governed by this. And it fits into my belief that this Earth here is an emotional planet. And for a person who was very much cut off from a lot of the feelings, even though I'm a very feeling person, life when I was younger and as I got older, I went more into my head. I have a good mind. So what happened was I had to learn how to come back into the feelings. And now I'm going to go back to the lower arcana for a moment. 4 suits. And so this is what my philosophy is, and this is what I say a lot to a lot of my clients, is that according to me, there are 3 ways we create our reality. The first way is how we think. Now, this is the ace of the thinking of the wands. This is a new thought that comes in, which is, here's your castle of dreams. So this is your goal in the background. And so you're coming on in with this thought that comes in. And you do not create anything unless you have a thought. It's like the framework of a house. You have a framework, you have an idea. It's an idea. Now, how that idea works in life is the other 10 symbols. But basically, everything begins with a thought. You either take that thought and work with it, or you reject it. But that thought will be there. And it'll have this one says, a new idea, a new goal comes in. So that's how we first create, as the thought arrives. Then through the cups, we learn, what do we do with this? Where does it go? How does it work? This is the application of the spirituality. This symbol is one of my favorites because it's very spiritually based. The Dove of Peace brings the sacrament into the cup, and this M here, as it shows up in several symbols, is the union between the spiritual source and the physical world. And from that, it overflows. Then again, a lot of mythology down in the lake here. I think there's 10 water lilies, which is the Wheel of Fortune, which is the law of change. There is 13, I may have this back to front, by the way. And then there's the death symbol, that represents the death symbol, which is rebirth, moving out. This is a transformational element in our feeling, in our connection to source, into all sorts of things. So, okay, how do I explain that? And I said, and then when we have the thought, the energy that we put behind the thought will determine a lot of things that happen. And I put it this way when I get really, if I need to explain it, sorry. The universe is big. There's what have we got? 9 billion of us? 7 for sure. 7 billion for sure. Everyone is having a thought. We call that the collective consciousness, where the majority of the thoughts are just wandering around and no one is really in command of how they think. And all these feelings are running around pushing this thought. So if you want that universal energy out there to recognize what you want, you have to power some energy into that thought of getting it. You have to have energy. If you want to do anything, you need some energy with it. And this is what the emotional energy is about, to be able to empower the thinking that you want in creating your goals. And so we've got the thought, we've got the energy, and then we have the swords. The Ace of Swords is basically the problems, and this is my interpretation, the problems and the situations that we have in our life and how we resolve them. And this symbol, I remember the night this symbol really spoke to me and talked to me. I'm just going to put it on this side, it's easier for me. Now, all aces come out of the cloud. So this is how we respond. How are we going to respond? An issue has arrived in the life. Honestly, everyone has an issue that comes in that affects them emotionally, that affects their world in some way or another. Now, what do we do about it? if you look down at the bottom, it looks like it could be mountaintops or it could be the sea. It's more likely the sea because if the emotions get stirred over this handle, and it's a little difficult to see on this because of the light reflection here, but you've got three, what we call yards of light this side and three on this side, which is 6, which takes us to the higher arcana card of the Lovers, which is confusion. The top, we have a crown, and we have that which the laurel wreath over, and the palm tree, which is male and female. So it works with everybody. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. You have a decision to make. This is about a decision. Do you choose to resolve this issue now? Or do you choose to stay in confusion and let it grow? Because that's what happens with these situations. If we don't deal with a situation in its bud, and we like the old saying, you put your head in the sand, then what begins to happen is that it gets bigger and you have to resolve it later. Eventually you need to resolve it, or you get overwhelmed by everything, and it sort of, through the velocity of its own, it clears. So those are the 3 major ways that we create: how we think, how we feel, how we respond. When I began to really consider about the thought form of we create our own reality, I realized that the majority of what we create is in response to whatever's going on. And if the odd time in my life I've had to sit down and create from nothing, like saying, because I'm not responding to anything, it's like, this is what I want. But mostly it's because something has happened and then I have to recreate or redo something else. So that Ace of Swords is very important, or the sword symbology is very important, because it's really how we're responding to the circumstances in our lives. And then lastly, we have this one. This is the Ace of Pentacles. This to me is your material world. You can have your thoughts, you can have your feelings, you can have your responses, but how does it manifest? Here we've got this beautiful large pentacle arriving into the lilies and roses. Remember in The Magician, that was what we aspire to. There's a pathway leading out into the mountains, because the mountains represent life, what we go through. This is just the beginning. How does things manifest into the life? Are you manifesting what you really want? Are you manifesting your well-being? Are you manifesting your ideas, your goals? And right now, seriously speaking, the majority of us live in a situation which is not exactly how we want to be living, what with all the restrictions and other things going on. So how are we responding to that? Are we responding with a lot of emotion, which I sometimes do? Are we responding with whatever? Or are we responding with dignity, and knowing that it is our thought that creates? And are we putting the thoughts out in a way that is aiding us people to be stronger, to be more clear, and to be aware? I'm just casting a look on the 3 subtopics I wanted to talk to them. The second one I really want to talk about, what else does this do? Develop your psychic muscle. Starting on this May the 6th it's 2021, I'm beginning another 8-week class once a week, every Thursday night, on a tarot class, learning how to not only read these, but learn the philosophy and some other things that I throw in as well. And what was exciting, I just completed last month that the first 8 weeks, and I got some wonderful notes from the people who are participating, say how much they enjoyed it. Well, how come they enjoy it? Not just because of me talking a lot, but because they're having homework where they have to learn. They read for themselves every day, and in reading for themselves every day, your psychic muscle, which could be shut down, or you may have clairvoyance, or you may have auditory, but you haven't got kind of an awareness. And so that muscle becomes aware. And what's the most important person in your life is yourself. So we read for ourselves. We learn to be able to look at the symbology, to learn how to relate to it, to learn where it is. And I still read for myself, maybe not I did most days when I was teaching, because if I say give homework to my students, I also do it. And it was kind of good to get back into reading for myself, feel pretty well consistently every day, because all of a sudden the pattern begins to rise that you didn't even realize was happening. Your behavior, because what I haven't mentioned is the attitudes we have, because through the court cards, which are our habits, and it's our habits that dictate our lives. Believe me, we just respond without thinking. Bang, there it is, old response. And we want those responses to be more effective. So anyway, it was about learning how to get this cyclic muscle. Now for me, what it did for me way back was open up my psychic eye, I guess you could say, when I first started. And I started having I'd look at the symbol and then I'd have a clairvoyant vision. And I want to report one that I had when I was doing some mini readings last Saturday for people. I'm still laughing about it. I had two flashes, all of us, but one was really, to me, funny. I'm reading something here, and all of a sudden, in my mind, in my psychic mind, I see a Rubik's cube all twisting around. And I had to kind of blink for a moment, and then I said, we were talking about a subject, of course, and I said, oh, it looks like a Rubik's cube. It's like it's got to get all straightened out, and and it's going to take a little bit, but you can do it. You can straighten this out. And the person said, yeah, I understand perfectly. And that's the one thing I've learned over the years. If I get something, whether it's a word or whether it's a vision, it's like, go with it, and the person will say, oh yeah, that makes sense. That relates. And so that's what working with the psychic muscle really adds to that. And so it helped me on my psychic road. Yeah, I have also learned how to open up different channels and in my own psychic way that I also teach. But it's, that's one of the delights I see, is I see people begin to open up, and some people go on to become readers. Most read it for themselves. And that's a comment I've had many, many times. This was the best, I used to teach it at night school. This is the best night school program I've taken, because I'm still using it 10, 12 years later. I still use it for myself. And so that to me is another thing, that psychic muscle. But probably the most important was because of those daily readings, as it gave me a personal tool. It gave me a personal tool to understand me. And I was like everyone else. I had my childhood issues that I didn't know I had, but I did, as they evolved years later. It helped me solve and work through at times my personal problems with my two major relationships. It helped me find my inner knowingness, and began my journey to connect to the larger force, not just through the tarot, but it expanded my awareness, and I could always bring it back. And when I found about a new behavior, I would come back to the tarot and say, well, it has to be here somewhere. And I would find it again, especially in the court cards, which reflect the attitudes of life. So the personal element to me is the most important thing, to understand yourself. Now, did I always listen to what it told me? Did I always listen to my guides when they tell me? No. Do I listen to my high self when it tells me? No. But I've learned if I do, I'm better off. I've learned that as I create an inner connection, I trust more. As I work with an inner knowingness, things are clear for me. The information is given to me. It all becomes wonderful. This learning the tarot set me on a path that I would never in 100 years have dreamt for myself, because it did give me a career. It did give also the opportunity to open up to help many other psychics and people that were coming into the beginning to grow the health ring. And I just, first, I often just go what comes in my head. I used to produce large psychic fairs. And one year, one of my top performers in doing healing work, I still to this day think her with great love, we were doing a show in Vancouver at the convention center there. And we used to open Friday night and we go feeling leave. No, 10 or 11, I think. It's a lot of years ago, but this thought just came in, so I'm going to share it. For some reason, someone needs to hear this. Anyway, Saturday morning rode around. It was busy, and this gal who usually went, because every now and again I worked in the shows, but also I used to walk around, make sure everyone was okay. And this Saturday morning, this top, oh, she was so, I just loved her. She was a tiny little thing, but great healer, super healer. She comes up to me and she says, Norma, I haven't had one person come in. And I went, what? You're one of my top healers. You're one of my top performers. What's going on? And so I said, I'll come with you. Let me take a look. So she said, well, I came in and I cleared my space and everything. And I looked at her and I said, sweetheart, you over cleared your space. No one wants to come in there. It's too sterile. Let's just put some pink light in there and fluff it up a bit. So she walked back into her booth with her little table behind her. And I walked just basically around a square, and I walked around and she had someone on her table and she looked up at me and gave the thumbs up. Now, that was what made me do those shows for so many years, because I was able to help people understand energy, understand what they could do and what they couldn't do, and make things right. But anyway, that was a story that came to me, so someone might want to look at that. Are you making your energy too sterile? No one wants to come into a sterile environment. It's like, ooh, I'm too, it's too clean for me. So that, just to be aware of that. Anyway, that was a little story that popped into my head. I have many of them, but that one was for today. So it gave me a personal tool. And the thing is, if you want to need a personal tool, it's so much easier to sit down and talk to yourself, because I still talk to myself. In fact, I was telling somebody the other night, long back, several visits back to New Zealand, my brothers turned to me one time and said, do you realize you talk to yourself? I said, well, I do live by myself. So yeah, I probably do mumble away at myself about something that was going through my head. 78 symbols that show you about life, called the tarot. Since I began reading way back in 1965, I started. 1964, pardon me, it was November 6th, 1964, I began. There have been many decks. I began collecting them first until it got just crazy. It was just like too many were coming out, all kinds. One of the things I love about this original symbology is it has distance. And because it had distance in some of the symbols, I want to show you these two again. Ace of Cups. Distance, how long does that take? You learn to lurk at distance. How long? Here we got a pathway. Where is that going to take you? There's many other symbols that have distance in them. They show you where you're heading. It's not just this is how it is. A lot of the symbols, like the world, is like that. The magician is like that. But many of the lower arcana have all these scenes in the background, or on the side, or there's things going on that takes your eye, and that's important to you in that moment. And so you expand, not just from 78 symbols, but it's how do you link them? That's one of the keys. That is, how do you go from A to B to C to D? And it's the learning of that is important, because life is a series of events. And even though we may think of our lives in little blocks, it's actually this block goes into that block, goes into this block, goes into that block. And what is the vibration of that? And that's why I love the tarot. I can't imagine it not being part of my life. Oh dear, I'm getting emotional. Imagine that. I still get to do readings. I do a lot of other work as well, but this is the mainstay for me. This is the main philosophical, spiritual / philosophical element of looking. And I just trust somewhere in there you may learn a little bit about it. And so I'll come to understand if you want to open your psychic developments, this is one way of doing it. I also teach opening up your psychic patterns, which I'm doing Well, I think I'm doing that next month as well, actually, for just a short 3-day course on it in the evening. But anyway, know that you're a psychic being. Naturally, you're born psychic. We shut it down. It gets overwhelming sometimes. And I just want you to know that the mystery of life does reside in these 78 symbols. And I just want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for all your subscriptions, your likes, your comments. I appreciate every one of them. And I just want to wish you well. And I want to say thank you. And if you want to get hold of me, please go to my website, normacowie.com, and send me a message. Thank you. Bye.